Kris Tyson is in some hot water for some extremely disturbing things about her past. An intern has put both herself and the MrBeast brand in serious risk. However, things are all over the place right now, so today we'll be taking a look at everything from beginning to end so we can understand what exactly is going on easier. Shout out to the channel members like always, and if you'd want to support yourself, you can subscribe to my Patreon in the corner or YouTube memberships by clicking the join button. Make sure to like the video. Now let's take a look deeper together at this entire mess. To start things off, Kris was born on July 1st, 1996, meaning that she is currently 28 years old as of this video. Also, to make it clear now rather than later, I won't be going over any of the other tame stuff like how she bragged about being super rich and threatening to sue someone. I really don't care about that compared to what we're about to go into. Now, Kris here has a storied history surrounding her posts revolving around lolicon artwork as far back as December 2016 when she was just 20 years old, as she would be seen making this post about lolly. They've since responded to someone about this post in specific, saying that they used to be a bad person 7+ years ago but have since changed for the better and whatnot, showing that hey, maybe this was just a one-off really poor taste joke and nothing more. Well, there's a bit more going on here than just some jokes, as Kris was also a follower of Shad of Man on Twitter, an infamous artist who was known for drawing NSFW lolly artworks of real-life children. That guy is what you would call a pedophile, and Kris has a history of replying to his Twitter account whenever he would post new artwork on his page. Now, most of these replies are just very strange to see at a first glance, but it would get weirder as Kris had also replied to another random Twitter person whenever they would talk about Shad of Man art, such as this NSFW comic Shad of Man made of the cartoon character Caillou, a whole-ass 4-year-old child. They would also make reference to Tide Pods and spaghetti in the same vein, a combination that seemed rather odd to put together even during the Tide Pod craze back in 2018. It turns out this is actually a reference to another Shad of Man artwork in which a mother and son engage in activities together while eating spaghetti and Tide Pods at the dinner table, showing that Kris was much more in tune with more niche drawings only someone well versed in his lore would know about. In this post, Shad of Man would send a screenshot of a random anime character implying he was going to draw NSFW artwork of her, and Kris would respond pleading for him to do so. This character is from the anime The Rising of the Shield Hero, with their name being Raptelia, a 17-year-old girl. However, you may notice she looks young and not like the cover art we just saw, and that's because part of the show's plot involves her becoming a 10-year-old girl, and that image is the image that Kris replied to. Now, one might see this as Kris just being reckless, but she's a known anime enthusiast and has said so proudly in the past, so it's within reason they might have seen the show before or known of its existence and knew the character's age when replying. And at that, they already look under 18 to begin with, but again, it shows just how deep Kris was in this rabbit hole. Kris even posted at one point on her Twitter a clip of when they were streaming and how they accidentally opened up Shad of Man's site for however many people were watching, though thankfully it had safe for work art on the front page.
Here, let me check.
Maybe their bank flow.
That is not, no! Oh, that was almost really bad.
Now we can see that Kris, for all intents and purposes, was a viewer of NSFW lolicon artwork, as that spaghetti Tide Pod reference is too niche for the average fan literally no matter how someone puts it. However, the worst was yet to come, as I'm sure some of y'all been waiting for this, as Kris has also gone on record talking about how they apparently bought a physical art piece of Shad of Man artwork when they were about 21 years old. This would be proven to be true as she posted on her very own Twitter account on July 12th, 2017 of a picture of this exact poster for the world to see, that which contains a clearly underage girl in skimpy clothing with an autism cat and a spade tattoo on her thigh that says BBC, obviously implying what you're thinking right now. That image was also released in a poster collection just 10 days ago on the 2nd, meaning that Kris was very fast to the punch when it came to purchasing the poster and posting that online picture. This is frankly disturbing, as while being a fan of Shad of Man is already extremely gross, buying physical lolly artwork that you can quite literally touch and hang up on a wall is a whole other level of disgusting. It gets weirder though, as in the MrBeast video tipping pizza delivery guys $10,000, around the 9-minute 30-second timestamp you can see the poster freely hanging on the wall, meaning this wasn't even a poor attempt at an edgy joke either. The video was uploaded on August 23rd, 2017, and if you remember, Kris was born July 1st and recently had their 21st birthday, meaning they weren't being an edgy 15-year-old, they were 3 years into being a fully grown adult, and yet they would buy this artwork and continue to interact with Shad of Man and his website for the next 2 years. At one point, it seemed MrBeast was at least aware of Shad of Man's existence, as he would reply positively to someone using a meme of him on a Shad of Man post, but this is the only time he ever makes reference to the guy, and it's very tame all things considered, so take that however you will. As we can see, Kris was a fan of lolicon and Shad of Man and his artworks back in the day. There is no question about it. This seemed to have been mostly swept under the rug given it was over half a decade ago, but this stuff would start to spread in internet circles in mid-2023 and only recently made its way to the mainstream. And I gotta remind you, this wasn't someone who was a teenager being stupid and edgy. This is a fully grown adult who was into this artwork and buying physical pieces of it. However, during this time period when the news made its way to the public, there was some other stuff going on that had much more to dig through. Back on August 25th, 2023, I uploaded my video on Giggly Goon Clown, a straight up pedophile who got their Discord hacked and a whole bunch of stuff leaked in the process. Well, that story is something else entirely you should watch on your own time. Part of those leaks included someone named Gene/Ella Hollywood getting exposed for being a pedophile as well. Someone who just happened to be hanging out with his friend and streamer Finster and Kris recently at the time. Well, it was very likely Kris didn't know about Gene and his pedophilia. On June 5th, 2024, someone who was trolling her would eventually get a response about Gene, saying that they were Finster's friend and they only met him one time and haven't spoken since, basically wiping her hands clean of the situation. This response went under the radar, however, as just a few weeks later some more information would drop that would put things in a much different light than ever before. Now there's a Twitter user named LavaGS who turned 20 on November 12th, 2023, meaning that he was born in 2003. On his Twitch page, he would mention how he met MrBeast when he just had 500 subscribers and notably tags Kris Tyson as a friend they met on Discord, most likely after finding the MrBeast channel. Well, Lava has gone on to appear in MrBeast videos himself as an old friend. His friendship with Kris is the more interesting one going on here. Kris would make a post in 2018 asking if they should stream Fortnite later, with Lava saying for them to do so and Kris calling him dad asking if he wants to moderate it. Now this is obviously just a really weird joke, but you can see how Kris was 21 and Lava was 14 at the time, making this again just seem really weird. However, things would get weirder as a year later in January 2019, Lava showed Kris making a crude sexual innuendo joke to a group chat he was in on Snapchat, with Kris and Lava now being 22 and 15 respectively. Lava would make hentai jokes referencing Kris and implying they might have an addiction they haven't talked about, even showing that they would get into calls together on Discord despite being only 16 at this point in time. Lava would eventually drive out to meet Kris in real life in summer 2020, eventually posting a picture hanging out with Kris and Carl together on Instagram, showing that it was a success. The worst possible thing that came from these leaks was when Kris was joking about sending nudes to anyone who would donate to their Patreon, Lava donating $1 in a joking matter. Kris would then try to get him to send more, but it's clearly joking around, and that's really it. Now the jokes themselves are on the tamer side all things considered, and frankly none of this screams grooming to me, just poor judgment at worst. While it's tempting to make jokes like this because you know the person is old enough to understand and grasp nuance and such, at the end of the day it was still inappropriate for Kris to be joking like this with a minor 7 years younger than them, even if it was tame. However, this shows that Kris is okay with making jokes with people who are clearly young teenagers, and so they would start looking around to see if there was more to this or just a one-off bad experience. As people kept digging around for more stuff on Kris, they'd find a recent post where she showed off her old username TysonBoy34. This account ended up being the username of their old Reddit account from over a decade ago, showing that Kris was well in tune with some old classic edgy gamer word humor that, to be honest, nobody really cares about, even mentioning the smoke detector beep meme. However, things would spice up as they would find multiple references to how her dad doesn't really speak with her anymore even back then, with other posts talking about how their sisters are the ones who seem to get treated well while they were left in the dust. Even talking about a specific time they got a cheap $20 grill for Christmas while one of their sisters got a $25,000 wedding, showing that they were indeed the sore one left out on the mother and father sibling dynamic. Kris would make references to Shad of Man when the Incredibles 2 movie trailer dropped, and would go on to make a very edgy joke about lollying 14-year-olds whilst being an adult, which while seeming like just another edgy post any person can make online, given we know they like to consume that kind of stuff, it just comes off as disgusting to read. More interestingly, there's some more posts talking about how MrBeast himself threatened to outsource their workload after someone made a big mistake during their early adventures growing the MrBeast brand, showing that things may not all be peaches and cream even with their childhood friends on the production side of things. Remember that picture I showed of Shadman drawing IRL underage girls? Well, the person in that picture is Lieutenant Corbus, a YouTuber who got some fame back in the day for being very edgy despite being just an 11-year-old girl at the time. This was in February 2016 when she hit her stride after gaining some attention from people, but she ended up in her own controversy involving channel deletions that isn't relevant right now. On her channel, there's a video called A Quick Update uploaded on March 31st, 2016, a video that features Corbus talking over some Call of Duty Black Ops 3 gameplay for the runtime. We know that Kris is a fan of Shad of Man and that Shad of Man drew NSFW lolly art of Corbus. So tell me, why is the username TysonBoy34 seen as the person who recorded the gameplay? Why is Kris in contact with an 11-year-old to the point they share gameplay of theirs to her, a girl that happened to be drawn by one of his favorite lolly artists back in the day? The rabbit hole only seems to get deeper here, and given the serious implications going on, I decided to look into this to get to the bottom of everything. It turns out the video was actually uploaded on February 17th, 2016 as seen by this old screenshot, meaning that Kris is in contact with her even a little more than we initially just went over. The Shad of Man Corbus art piece seems to have been posted on either November 21st or 22nd, 2016, as seen by this post on a Lieutenant Corbus Steam group page in the Sleepycast subreddit, so thankfully this means that Kris did not see the artwork before meeting her, it just happened to be a very bad coincidence that Shad of Man drew her 9 months later. So while it seemed that Kris was a big enough fan to share gameplay with her, she thankfully didn't have any ulterior motives going on here. There's also the possibility that Corbus just happened to lift the gameplay off Kris's channel, but the TysonBoy34 YouTube channel has no Black Ops 3 gameplay on it, so it's still more than likely they just shared it with her. While researching this part, I also found out that Shad of Man drew the art piece Kris bought on June 19, 2017, a few weeks before he made it a poster for those interested in that information. Now, TysonBoy34 has a video spreading the leaks of iCarly star Jeanette McCurdy way back when the fappening went down in 2014, a decade ago, with Kris saying not to view them due to privacy reasons while still linking them down below.
Because Nickelodeon has that kind of power. But the link's in the description if you want to see them. I mean, I'm not endorsing people to go look at somebody else's private business, but I know that you know, people might want to see them, so it's there if you want it.
The link itself is dead now, but it's still funny seeing how they made a video to not view them while still promoting that. She's also since deleted her Reddit account within a few days after the post started going around, but by this point the information was out there already, so it just further confirmed it was her by how quick it got nuked. As all this news is spreading around like wildfire, a Twitter account named Young No Name will make a post saying that he had Kris as a friend on Snapchat since 2018. In the messages, you can see how he had a small chat in March 2018 when Kris was 21 years old and they were allegedly 14, and 2 months later on May 6th, Kris would send kissy emojis to them seemingly out of nowhere, which is just weird to read. Now it's possible these might be fake, but Young No Name will end up posting a video showing him scrolling through their messages to prove they were indeed real. This secret message takes place on July 5th, 2019, meaning that they've been talking for a year now, and the message itself is just known thought Belle Delphine trying to sell her bathwater online. Below that is a heart emoji, and given the user is now assumed to be 15, it's still really weird to see. When checking out No Name's Instagram, there would be a post showing his face looking young, and when seeing that it was posted on February 10th, 2024, unless the guy has the best skin in America, it shows he was definitely underage when Kris started talking to him. He would also post 2 videos of Kris chatting in their Discord server with him and his friends, the first not really being much other than general gamer shit talk, but the second one has Kris making self-cucking jokes, which is pretty funny to see.
I know, dude, I would inside of that egg and then watch her eat it and then watch her have sex with another man while she comments about how my genitalia can never satisfy her.
It's worth pointing out the clip is from April 7th, 2019 instead of 2018, as you can see in the corner down there. It's not that big of a deal, but still, it's worth pointing out. Back in July 2018, MrBeast put out a message talking about an Amazon card giveaway for his fans, and Lava replied to a since deleted thread showing how they were having issues with the jacket. No Name would feel inclined to respond to Lava for some reason, saying that in today's world it feels sus, but back in the day that was how the humor was like, and that they don't think Kris is being weird about their Snapchat messages. Lava had been active on Twitter since the news broke, with MrBeast himself aware of what's going on and getting him into contact with Keemstar to give a statement, saying that he wasn't groomed and met up with Kris with his parents and not on his own, notably saying at the very bottom that Kris participated in edgy, inappropriate jokes with them when they were 13 years old, and as we saw, Kris was a 19-year-old adult about to turn 20 in a few months when they met. That means while the stuff they said on Twitter was rather tame, Kris indeed talked to a minor and made inappropriate jokes with him like he just said, with those behind-the-scenes jokes most likely being lost to time. Lava continued to say that his messages with Kris were in public chats and not one-on-one, and soon after the leaks from No Name, Kris would delete their Snapchat altogether, further proving that this is real and that she and her team are watching everything like a hawk as they go into damage control. A Twitter account named Dogpack404 would be made in June 2024, and on the 22nd of July during the mass exposure, he'd make a video showing that he worked for MrBeast recently and alleged that Kris has been a thorn in the brand's side for a while now, but they can't do anything about it legally.
I'm outside MrBeast studio right now. Here's a cornfield, I'll explain that tomorrow. I've just been driving by looking to see, you know, is there an FBI raid going on, what's happening? My name's Dawson. I worked at MrBeast from February to May of this year, 2024. Kris is the tip of the iceberg. And when Jake the Viking says, MrBeast knew, yeah, MrBeast knew. I heard many times that Ava, Kris Tyson, is a major liability, but they can't get rid of her because she's already threatened legal action and she knows too much. And when all this information comes out about everything that she knew, everything other people know, I promise you on everything MrBeast has done. Amazon, if you can get your money back, get your money back.
Things that get even weirder as some random astrology girl who predicted the very day Joe Biden would drop out of the presidential race would just so happen to be the cousin of Kris's ex-wife, meaning that forces beyond our comprehension are tipping the scales right now as we speak. On July 23rd, the very next day, Kris would put out their official response. That being a typical PR write-up that is clearly made to not acknowledge anything but just dip out, with the end saying that she'll relax with her family and focus on her mental health now. Given she has a kid and has shown interest in NSFW drawings of children, that ending is pretty concerning to think about, but I digress. She'd eventually add some more stuff on top of that thread, saying how Lava said he wasn't groomed by her to back herself up, more stuff about how people are trying to skew narratives against her, and again says she left on her own accord from the MrBeast brand, which is up for debate. Later that day, Keemstar would get No Name into a Twitter space, in which he again says that he believes Kris wasn't being malicious or grooming them, but that's just how jokes were back in the day.
But yeah, I honestly agree with Lava's standpoint. That was just the humor at the time, you know, like, dude, we were all watching like Leafy on YouTube, and like that's just how people talked. But yeah, bro.
So you think the nature of the Discord was just like edgy humor?
Yeah, it was 100%.
Was it over the top sexual though?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna say no because it wasn't like that though. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't in a weird way.
While this is true and a lot of y'all watching this video right now can agree people in general were a lot edgier, the thing here is that you and your friends saying edgy stuff was just that, being extremely edgy for shock value and humor. We're all guilty of saying edgy stuff in our lives, but the thing is that we weren't constantly communicating with a lolicon artist, we definitely weren't buying physical art from them to hang up on the wall, and we weren't making these dumb, stupid, edgy jokes with random minors on the internet. Kris, however, was. Kris was doing that kind of stuff, and Kris had no issue with this and was so comfortable to the point they uploaded a clip accidentally opening up the site on Twitter back in April 2019. This has levels to it, and we can clearly see that Kris was much deeper in this than some edgy memer back in the day. On the 24th, someone named Nathan would come out on Twitter and say he was in contact with Kris when he was 15 and they were around 20 to 21, before going on to say that Lava sent him an NDA to work on the MrBeast brand together. He would also say that in Kris's Discord server, they would talk about a lot of inappropriate stuff and even had a bot that posted NSFW images despite being around teenagers at the time, going on to scrub the entire server for anything bad before it went public. However, Nathan wouldn't back up any of this heinous stuff with evidence, with people only knowing that he was indeed in the friend circle and nothing more, and given the severity of the claims, it would be reckless to promote his word as the truth. Lava would actually chime in and start to deny everything Nate just said, saying that there was no NDA and that he was kicked out of their friend group for being unstable and lashing out at people, also saying that the Discord server had nothing bad in it, though does imply it was indeed a private friend group before going public. He also tries to use guilt by association as he worked with Jake the Viking, a former MrBeast member who's very critical of Kris and the MrBeast team, but nobody cares about that given Kris is already proven to be a massive fucking creep by this point. Nate would reply back denying what Lava said, though does admit to being unstable back then, saying he left the place on his own accord because it was toxic, doubling down on the claims he sent him an NDA, and doubles down on the NSFW claims saying he's trying to cover for Kris hard for some reason. Everything was still up in the air by this point, as while people wanted to believe what Nate was saying, he had no proof of anything he was saying other than being in the friend group, so it seemed that this was nothing so far as people were waiting to see if anything would come from this situation. In the late night of July 24th, 2024, MrBeast himself will put out his official response, saying that he is disgusted by the stuff that's come out about Kris and that the company is hiring a third party to properly investigate the situation. He would say he removed Kris from the company, contradicting Kris saying that they left on their own accord earlier, and that he'll wait for the investigation to finish before he takes any further actions. It was a typical PR response, but it wasn't necessarily bad, unlike Kris's response, and speaking to Kris again, things were about to get a whole lot worse for her. Remember how I was just saying that Nate wasn't pulling up with no evidence? Well, the next day on the 25th, he would do just that in a second video posted online, in which he talks about how his friend Cookie had old photos he wanted to give to him. That which shows Kris mentioning the NSFW channel that Lava was saying never existed. Kris mentions two roles that would still have access to the NSFW channels, that being Gods and Anointed, and it would turn out that Lava himself would actually mention those roles in a message he sent during the cleanup phase. The colors are yellow and green respectively, and guess who has a yellow colored name on Discord? Nate. Guess how old Nate is right now? 21 according to his Twitter page. That means even if by some miracle that Kris didn't send anything to NSFW themselves, she was still running a place where we now know that minors were exposed to NSFW adult material all while she was around 21 to 22 years old. Oh, but it gets better, as Nate would go on to show that Cookie saved a general chat and mod logs during the sweeping, meaning that not only do we now know that Lava is sweeping for Kris and his word is to not be trusted anymore, we're just a simple post away going from what could be the biggest internet influencer leak of all time. As people were trying to get their hands on the leaks, Kick streamer Zimzim would get a small sample for them and start streaming for people to see, with this image on screen being the main highlight I want to go over. This is the full, unedited, non-moving image to show y'all that this is a real screenshot, not me scrolling or editing strange right now. You can see that Kris was talking in the chat for a little bit, with Nate going on to say that he made the NSFW channel at Kris's request. Kris would then respond to the chat once more at the very bottom there, not acknowledging what Nate just said, meaning either they were ignoring him or this was known already and not something they felt the need to chime in on. Later that night, Nathan would drop the full uncensored logs of the moderator chat for people to dig through, and while there was certainly a lot to dig through, it's best to stick to the most damning pieces for brevity's sake. While we already know that Nate had access to the NSFW stuff based on his god role, someone would mention that Kris is the one who gives out the role in specific, meaning that Kris more than likely handpicked a miner to have access to the NSFW chat in her server. After the server was made public, MrBeast member Chandler would talk in there for a small moment, but I want to point out that this was after it was made public and this is the only time during this time frame he ever spoke, meaning that it's extremely unlikely he knew about anything going on. When discussing what to do with the NSFW chat as it was now in limbo, Kris wouldn't seem to show any care that minors could potentially have access to it, with Discount Milk pointing this out as Kris says, "What, am I a parent?" showing that she didn't understand just how bad what she was encouraging. When Discount Milk said to demon anybody under 18, Nathan seemed to get a bit antsy about that idea, as while so far in the logs there was no way to prove Kris knew he was a minor, it was still a suspicious reaction. Lava would chime in and get the same way, meaning they were both against this idea for whatever strange reason they might have had. Nate would then indirectly confirm to everyone that he and someone named Bryce are both underage by asking for a special role, with this Bryce person being Lava as seen in an Instagram pic he took with Carl and Kris. This means that by this point, even if there was some sort of possibility that Kris just happened to not know their ages, right then and there, Kris and everybody else in the mod chat now knew that these two were minors, and instead of panicking or acting shocked by this revelation, they continued on with the chat, meaning that it's very likely they knew their ages before the server was made public. It would also come out that after someone pinged a Discord bot months later that the NSFW chat was still around and only open to 4 people, with those 4 being Kris, Lava, Nate, and a new person named Impractical that was added months later. The rest of the logs are mainly just usual Discord moderation stuff that's not worth digging into, but it was very clear by now that Kris knew that Nate and Lava were minors and had access to NSFW stuff. While we don't know what was sent in there or if Kris somehow didn't post anything themselves, it doesn't matter because it's a 22-year-old's job to not let underage people into these circles, but that ended up happening all up in their own space. After we saw that Lava was lying to people about there being no NSFW chat, in the early morning of the 26th, he would fold and say he swears he just misremembered, but that he still believes he wasn't groomed by Kris, which to be fair, that last part's still up in the air. However, something much more important dropped a few hours before this, as Cookie would go on to post 3 screenshots on Twitter for people to see. The first shows Kris had a second private server alongside their now public main one, and the second one shows Discount Milk sending an NSFW gif of anime in their porn chat, with that gif notably including underage girls in the background. Kris would respond asking for the sauce and show that this took place on December 13th, 2019, almost a whole year since the main server was made public, and Cookie would be seen responding in chat at one point. Cookie is said to have been 16 when this happened as well, which if true is again just another really bad look for Kris and all the other adults involved. Now in the anime chat on an unspecified date, Kris would ask for those talking at that very moment to be given a role for a secret chat with just them in it so they can send NSFW images to each other, including some traps specified by Kris themselves and an ironic little twist going on here. It seems the plan might have been followed through with, as Kris would then say to pretend the chat never happened and for his friend to purge what was said. Of course it's not a secret because someone decided to screenshot the conversation, so now we have proof of Kris being extremely reckless and not vetting ages. However, we don't know if that NSFW chat ever happened, so that's still up in the air. Cookie would drop a very interesting message during all this from around the time the server was made, shown on October 5th, 2017. MrBeast himself would chime in on the banter after some people were saying some edgy stuff. While most people like myself don't really care given it was just stupid and edgy young adults, seeing that MrBeast was in an environment like this as well as talking about Kris and their member size really doesn't make him look good for his brand. Lava meanwhile was still speaking up and trying to shift the narrative around, with that long message on screen being the entirety of it as people continue to call him a liar. Speaking of lying, see this part on screen where he's saying how the Great Cleansing was years after the server went public so they could try and get partnered with Discord? Well, if you remember, the server went public in late January 2019 as seen by Chandler being in the mod chat around that time, and 10 months later in late November 2019, Lavo commenced the Great Cleansing as he states down there at the bottom it was for Discord partnership, meaning he was lying once again to the public. I don't know why Lava keeps lying to people like this, but I ain't stopping him from speaking as it shows he's not thinking things through and could eventually slip up and spill some more potentially important information, so I say let him keep cooking. It's also worth pointing out that despite Lava not feeling like a victim, he is one because at one point a mod would question if an image sent was CP, which while it was very likely not the case and probably just a normal pic or a bad meme, the fact a minor was a head honcho for people to go to check on stuff like this is disgusting, especially when this was all under the watch of Kris at the end of the day. It honestly makes me wonder if there was really grooming going on, not necessarily in a way to get closer to the minor, but more so Kris delegating a minor to deal with situations that no minor should ever have to look at themselves. It only gets crazier though, as Nate would start to tease that Cookie has over 500,000 messages of the general chat of the Discord server, and sure enough, Cookie was teasing just that right on his own page, meaning that we are quite literally at the tip of the iceberg right now. He would even tease the very first set of messages in the general chat from way back on June 2nd, 2017 when it was made, and if you remember, MrBeast was seen in the general chat in October 2017, meaning that we might have ourselves one of the biggest scandals in YouTube history sitting behind a push of a button. While people are waiting for the logs to drop, someone named Mooski, a person that Kris was dating on and off, would come out and say that she sexually assaulted them. Now, I'm not going into this story because it wasn't sexual assault unlike how Mooski was trying to say. It was a one-sided relationship where Kris used them for pleasure whilst not giving any back. It's frankly annoying for someone to try to insert themselves into a serious situation with stories like these that only muddy the waters, but I digress. However, there was one interesting part, and that was towards the very end where earlier in July this year, Mooski told HR at the MrBeast company about what happened between the two of them and that an investigation was open, meaning that all this was going on behind the scenes just mere weeks before Kris got exposed for the Shad Man and underage kids in the Discord server stuff. Nathan would start to tease the release of the logs on a custom website with a countdown timer, and people sit by waiting to see if anything substantial would come of this or just be a bunch of nothing. Something that seems to be flying under the radar is that MrBeast publicly knew about this stuff about Kris. As in that pizza driver video back on August 23rd, 2017, you can clearly see him eyeballing the art piece on the wall, meaning that he didn't just happen to not see it the entire time when filming, as he quite literally at that very moment knew that something was up with Kris. And get this, within 4 hours after posting his response, that pizza driver video would magically go down from 12 minutes 49 seconds to 10 minutes 27 seconds. All the comments referencing the art piece are now gone, and that part where MrBeast was looking straight at the art piece are also now gone. Clearly, MrBeast and the brand were now trying to hide the fact that he knew with proof for at least 6 years and 11 months that Kris bought Lolicon artwork, adding a lot of doubt if that third-party investigation is a legit effort or part of some good old-fashioned sweeping. They still seem to be the leading comments whenever I've been checking a pizza video, and they will continue to do so because this right here has led to one of the biggest scandals in YouTube history. That on top of the leaks dropping soon, and we were in the midst of what could be one of, actually no, the biggest downfall in YouTube history. Eventually, the entire general chat for us to dig through would be leaked for the world to see, and let me tell you, there was certainly some interesting stuff going on alright. So to get this out of the way, the first thing that MrBeast said was on July 15th, 2017, around a month and a half after the server was first created. The worst thing that MrBeast ever said in the server was right here when he called his friend a cracker when trying to play video games with him. He wasn't very active at all, would mainly just join to ask people to play games with him, with the last time he ever spoke being on February 9th, 2019. It seemed he was only active and would only ask people to play games with him, so it seemed he was in the clear for the most part. However, it is worth pointing out he was indeed in the server and it wasn't a fan pretending to be him or anything like that, so take that however you will. Further proof of Kris knowing that the NSFW chat was a thing would come out with her locking it soon after it was made and saying it was only for people to god roll. When the server was first made public on January 27th, 2019, a new user would question why there's an NSFW chat the next day, with another user saying there was an 18+ warning for anyone who clicked on it, meaning that it had a warning but anybody could access it at first. Nate himself would confirm this later on in chat as well, meaning that for a very short moment anyone could click on an NSFW chat no matter the age. There's this one line from Kris right here that sounds really bad, but I'm gonna be real. I'm confident this was just a bad joke as no one in the general chat responded to this in a shocking way like they just saw something crazy, and at that, if Kris really did send pics, it would for sure have been leaked online by now. On the 29th, the NSFW chat would be locked behind a wall as they decided it was a very bad idea to have it accessible to the public, with Kris themselves confirming as such to the people. However, it's worth pointing out again that the channel still technically existed with Lava and Nate having access to it as minors, albeit presumably unused past this point. Now before the server was made public, back in October 2017 when it was still a place for friends, Kris would randomly post a link to Shadman's website out of the blue, which is pretty weird. Later on, after it was made public, she would say she was refreshing the site daily when joking around with people, but given the site is full of drawings of underage people and we know Kris likes that, it's frankly disgusting to see them talking about such a gross place publicly where minors are around like this. There's even this one post on the server was still private where Kris says somebody was only 14, but the image linked is dead now. However, if you put your mouse over the link to read the file name, you can see it was of Daniel Bergoli, the Catch Me Outside girl that went viral years ago. Kris was 21 when they sent this post, and while it's clearly just a joke, given the lolly interest, it just comes off as very freaking weird. Now, when going through the rest of the Discord, I won't lie, it's full of just a bunch of bad jokes that, while some are inappropriate, no doubt, they don't scream any sort of grooming to me. The worst thing we can see is that everyone initially had access to the NSFW channel the day the server was made public, but 2 days later it was made private after they realized just how bad it was. And given it was done very quickly, it's easy to see they knew it was wrong to keep it around, so there wasn't anything malicious going on in my opinion, just very stupid initial judgment. It doesn't help that Lava and Nathan were proven to be minors as seen from the mod chat before, and given that Lava has been around since he was 13 years old the day the server was made, with Nathan joining just a little over a year later, things are still looking pretty bad for Kris. And Practical also first joined the server after it was made public, for those wondering. The point is here, things are still looking very bad for Kris as they enabled an environment where minors can make these crude, inappropriate jokes around them, and instead of being an adult and shutting down these kinds of jokes, they would participate in them even if they were mostly tame overall. It's a fine line because it's virtually impossible to vet jokes as people love to push boundaries and joking around, but these kind of jokes that Kris is participating in were with minors, as this is a MrBeast related server and everybody knows that the majority of his audience are kids. I certainly understand if the minors are making these jokes and Kris wasn't around so they weren't able to moderate it, but instead of telling these kids to stop when they were around, Kris would participate in these inappropriate jokes instead. On top of that, it always comes back to the Shad Man stuff, as knowing that Kris is into lolly art, it just gives everything a very extra weird vibe going on. These logs are proof that Kris should not have been around minors and interacting with them at all. Also, some people still seem to be wondering if Lava somehow, someway didn't have access to the NSFW chat. Well, in January 2018, back when the server was still a place for friends, Kris would directly mention Lava to see if he could fix the hentai bot in the server, meaning that Kris at 21 years old was telling a now 14-year-old to fix a bot that posted NSFW artworks, meaning that he knew what was being posted and had the ability to mess with it so he could fix it. There's not much else to say here. It's clear that it was officially over for Kris, and now MrBeast was in hot water because he was in the server even if he wasn't very active. Now, some people are defending MrBeast by saying how it could just be a fan pretending to be him, so they would get the Discord ID of the user and see that it was named Jack Can The Goat. Jack Can The Goat just so happened to be the owner of the MrBeast gaming Discord server when you look it up online, and people see that MrBeast's full Discord name is MrBeast6451. When looking up Jack in the server, the name Jack King comes up, meaning that the name was changed. And when checking Jack King's old name, you can see that it was originally named MrBeast6451. This confirms that this was indeed the real MrBeast in Kris's server and not a fan or troll or anything like that. Remember Dogpack404 from earlier? Well, his identity as a former MrBeast employee would be confirmed, and on July 24th he'd upload his very own video exposing MrBeast for the world to see. While we're not going to dig very deep into that given it's about MrBeast and not Kris, there is one part I want to highlight for y'all. And that's when he caught people in the MrBeast crew making fake signatures during a t-shirt signing stream, showing one of the many shady things that we're willing to do to deceive their fans.
Also, using archive.org, we can see what the website looked like on the day of the stream, and while there's no mention of any sweepstakes whatsoever, it does say this limited tee signed by MrBeast and crew, but the description says it's signed by a member of the MrBeast crew, and it doesn't say anywhere that other members will sign MB, deceiving people into believing it was signed by MrBeast. So here's a clip of Tyler using MrBeast's signature. So Tyler signs MB, which is MrBeast's signature. Then he covers it, signs his own initials, TC, smirks, looks around, and then quickly slides the shirt away. Could you make it any more obvious? You know, you don't accidentally have someone else's signature as muscle memory. And again, I'm not a lawyer, I think this is fraud. Maybe they could say it's the brand's signature, even though it's clearly implied that this is Jimmy's signature, which was established during the last live stream.
Hey! MB, MrBeast. So this is MrBeast's signature.
No way, this one was signed by MrBeast. It's just got the MB, but that means it's signed by MrBeast. That's obviously his, MrBeast. This is so cool. That's obviously his, MrBeast.
You know, some people bought these shirts as collector's items or even investments, and this puts into question the authenticity of all MrBeast signed merch, which otherwise could have been very valuable one day. This was clearly muscle memory, and judging by his body language, he knew he exposed this. Even Tariq notices Tyler slip up and immediately looks into the camera, looks guilty, and then readjusts his body and rubs his hands together.
The video goes into a lot more stuff like how they potentially fake some of their content and whatnot, and I recommend you check it out on your own time to really understand what's going on with MrBeast. There's this part I save for last, because the information itself is a bit shady and inconclusive, but if what is said is true, it just adds a much stranger twist to everything going on here. A Twitter account named STWest3 would say that she's Kris's sister and that they apparently got turned on with stealing her clothes to wear. And given as we know that Kris is now transgender, the implications are concerning to think about. However, there's no 100% proof this is Kris' sister, but when checking out some old tweets, you can see her calling Kris part of her family and adding her old Twitter user Kris02. And people found out the name of one of Kris' sisters is Sarah Westbrook and that she's married. Now what can ST West stand for? That's right, Sarah Tyson Westbrook. And when checking her page now, she's telling people to leave her alone, meaning that while this isn't 100% confirmed still, it's more than likely this is indeed one of Kris' sisters. And if what she said about Kris getting turned on by wearing her clothing is true, there might be some more going on here that meets the eye. This whole Kris Tyson situation has been possibly the biggest rabbit hole in mainstream YouTube history. Never would I have ever expected that a core member of MrBeast, the most popular brand on YouTube and a channel promoted towards children, would have a member in there who is into some of the nastiest stuff the internet has to offer, alongside talking to multiple underage minors inappropriately in their pastime when they were an adult. On top of that, this initial exposure would lead to people finding out that MrBeast himself knew that Kris is into this stuff just under 7 years ago, and instead of keeping her out of his video productions and away from children from that point onwards, he instead helped her grow her net worth and influence up until it all came crashing down. Now former employees like Dawson are coming out of the woodworks to show just how shady things are behind the scenes, and for the first time in MrBeast's history, it seems that they're heading into some pretty rocky waters. As far as the Shad of Man stuff goes, there's been a massive witch hunt for anybody who's interacted with the guy past fall 2016 when he first became known for drawing children like that. And while I'm not getting into that now because it would disrupt this video's pace, let's just say there are a lot of massive content creators who used to talk to the guy online. There's been some developments too despite people thinking this story is over, as on July 31st the website hosting the Discord leaks will be taken down, with re-uploads also being taken down as soon as possible, meaning that MrBeast and his company are going extra hard in the paint to quell the noise. That includes sending a cease and desist to Dawson as well to try and silence him after making that video on the brand, in which he would play a compilation video basically mocking them and doubling down as he teases his part 2 coming soon. It seems that while the Kris Tyson side of things might be over, the MrBeast side is just beginning. And all we can do now is wait and see if that part 2 that Dawson is cooking up lives up to the hype, and more importantly, see just how far MrBeast and his brand are willing to go to silence any detractors of theirs.